away. It was so interesting because sometimes the writer would come up to me and give me notes. Sometimes it was the writer talking to me about maybe my take on a particular scene. I was struggling, believe it or not, with the scene where I had to kill the quorum. That was probably one of the hardest things I ever did. Because you only take out people that are against you in a coup, right? Because you're fighting for what you believe is going to be the greater good. And so they had the quorum actually agreeing with me. And then I walk out the door and I say, you know, take him out. And I said, he would never do that. You know, and because of the relationship between Ron, the writers, the producers, directors, they came over, we talked. They changed it instantly, and they made them obviously go against me, and then I had to walk out and do that choice. But it was still hard for me because I had to find, for me as an actor, a justification. I needed something to get beyond the having to kill this many people that were my best friends on that ship. And so I literally got pissed. It was like, you know, remember that little scene in the jailhouse when I talked to the gate and I said, you know, if we take this step towards doing a coup, that's an extreme mechanism, when all else has failed, you take this extreme because you believe in what you're doing, but people are going to die. Anybody against you, you have to take out, no matter how much you love them, in a coup. And so when I played that scene, it was like I was pissed off at Gator. I was really angry. I wanted to throw him up against a wall. You mother, you know, fracker. How's that? And then I was playing it, and of course I couldn't. I was so pissed off, and you know, I was really getting into it. And of course I thought, oh man, I hit a home run on that one. I was really into it. And then of course the writer comes out, Michael Angeles, and saunters over to me and says, Richard, can I talk to you for a few minutes? You know, and we walked over to the side, and this again is a trust issue because you really have to learn to build up trust. Because he asked me to go totally against my own instincts, and I think what Richard Hatch needed to deal with killing that many people. So he said, just say the words. Now that sounds like don't do anything, right? But that's not what it means. It means stop trying to do so much with it. Just talk, just look at him and say the words. And I did it. And they printed it, and I figured they already had the other take, and obviously in the editing room they're gonna go, the more emotional, angry, pissed off is gonna be more dramatic. They used the other take. And I gotta tell you, that was the best take. They were absolutely right. But again, actors do have, a lot of actors don't want to be directed. But on that set, because it was so collaborative, you were always searching for the best, most creative, most powerful way to play a scene. And everybody was working towards that goal. So nobody was really taking an ego diva position of it's gotta be my way. That's what I loved about this show. And I have not been on another show like that.
So. No, I never have been on a show that collaborative, particularly because it was shot in Vancouver, so each of us had to fly up individually to supervise our episodes, and you're stepping into an environment where you haven't been since the last time you did an episode. The directors rotate as on all TV shows, so that person wasn't there the previous week, and so the actors are the only ones who've been there the whole time, and the crew, and so it's these pieces coming together, trying to figure out how to make this show this week, and it didn't feel like it should work, and it just did consistently. It was so collaborative, and so much great came out of it. And I don't think, you know, the show Husbands that I write now, I co-write with the lead actor, and I don't think I'd be doing that if I hadn't had that great collaborative experience at Battlestar.
And if I could tell you how deep that goes. When I had my first meeting with Ron, he handed me the series Bible on 33 in Water. I said, well, you know, it's going to take me a while to find my place. And what I meant by that is anybody who's ever been a science advisor, if you step outside of a very narrow range of advice or of input, you get told, we'll handle the creative stuff, you just stick with the science, thank you very much. That never happened on Battlestar, but what Ron said is, oh, no. Understand that anything you want to give us, we'll take. And it's true. About half of what I submitted was military-related stuff. I submitted a few humorous lines that actually made it, not that there was all that many in the show, but actually made it into the final cut. And the first day of filming I ever saw was Colonial Day. And it was in the Chan Center at the University of British Columbia, and we were doing the quorum scenes. And Richard was doing a line, and he said, and he was trying to convince him to name the vice president. He said, and God forbid, if something should happen to the president. And he was doing it as written. But I went to the script supervisor and said, shouldn't he be saying God's forbid? She goes, and she runs up and she said, and then that's what ended up in the final version. But I was in Nolan as far as she knew. I mean, I was just there, that was my first day. She never met me, and they took it. I mean, no bristling, no nothing. It was just, that was the level of cooperation we had on the show.
Was that the first time that we'd heard gods in a familiar expression? And later on we had, oh my gods.
It wasn't, but it had already been established. That's why we need to say it, you know.
Absolutely. Great catch.
So now we're going to move on to the future of Battlestar Galactica. Obviously, that's rather relevant, as Universal has often and recently said that there will be a Battlestar Galactica movie. The latest I heard was oh, well, we're going to combine the past, you know, we're going to honor the past two shows or some such. So that being the case, being that it might come back, not necessarily what you want to see, but where do you like to see the future of Battlestar Galactica? Because if it is in fact the greatest science fiction, you know, TV show of all time, I think at some point something's going to happen with it. We know the way the studios are. They don't leave their successes on the shelf. They exploit them as much as possible. So, Jane, once again, tell us, expanding on what the missed opportunities are, what would you not like to see in the future? Because, you know, as we say, it's all happened before and it's all going to happen again.
Well, I'm going to give an answer that I don't think is exactly to the question you're asking, but I think it's a good answer anyway, which is who should do it, who should be involved, who should be the visionary behind it. Because I think, you know, both incarnations of Battlestar had a strong visionary with something to say. When I'm asked about Buffy movies, I always say I wouldn't be involved in it if it wasn't Joss running it, because I think that show was so singular to his vision. This is a different situation because there have been two different people who owned and created their version of Battlestar. So I suppose it's possible to hand it over to another visionary. At that point, I think the important thing is to let that visionary run with their vision of it. I think there's a great danger of blanding things out by making them a democracy, and if you sort of have everybody weigh in, every fan, everyone who's been involved weigh in with what they want it to be, you're going to end up with, okay, check mark, yeah, we got that, we got that,
right.
Instead of the inspired vision of a person who's like, I've got a story to tell, I'm going to make it my own, the audience is going to be happy because they won't know where it's going, because they didn't get a chance to vote. And I hate to take power out of the hands of the people, but I think there's something very powerful about a storyteller who is just given free rein to tell their story. So
Which is exactly Ron Moore's point when he appeared at the 25th anniversary Battlestar Galactica convention, which I was also at, and which Richard put on, and Kevin was there, and we're sitting in this very, very small room. You know, it's a fraction of maybe 12 rows of this room. And Ron gets up there, and this is 2003, and so it's before it's on, and Ron said, look, this isn't necessarily the Battlestar Galactica you want to see. It's a story that I want to tell, and give me a chance to tell it. So he was saying exactly what you're saying. All you writers, you all stick together. But it's true.
Yeah, we want a chance to delight and surprise people, and I think there's a certain amount when, and where you get that, where it's taken out of your hands, you end up with a product that people think they want that's actually not as much as they will enjoy the thing that they had no idea they wanted.
Right. Great. So I'm going to skip over Richard.
I want to add one thing to that. Has anyone ever seen the CSI episode Space Oddity, the murder at a sci-fi convention?
Yes.
Yeah, show of hands. Okay, to give you an idea what Galacticon was like for Ron, the scene where the producers is putting forth his new version of Astral Quest Redux, and that the angry crowd reaction, that is entirely patterned after Galacticon. Because the writers, the director, the guest star, that's a bunch of Battlestar people doing an episode of CSI. So that was absolutely patterned after his experience at Galacticon.
By the way, you have to understand, at that convention, I was trying to bring together everybody that had an idea where they wanted to take Battlestar, right? So we had Tom DeSanto, Brian Singer, Glenn Larson, Ron Moore, everybody. And people were pissed off that, whether it was Glenn Larson or Ron Moore or whoever, they all wanted their version of Battlestar. But there had been all this bad feedback online, this big war going on, right? about the new show. They thought it was going to be a 90210 version of Battlestar. You know, they're going to rip up the shreds, which, by the way, I mean, do we have any reason to trust networks or studios normally when they take a classic that we love and bring it back? Usually they blow it, they really do. But I thought with Battlestar, it shocked me because it was, I thought, as Kevin said, one of the best, if not the best, sci-fi show of all time for me on television, and I can't wait to see it in the movies. But I gotta tell you, when I walked in there, and I had not met Ron Moore, and then I saw in the big panel room, prior to him walking in, bags of popcorn. Yes, big bags of popcorn being brought in. I go, what is going on here? And somebody said that Ron got a little pissed off after a while about all the fan, you know, anger at what he was doing. And he basically said, look, if you don't like it, throw popcorn. And that's exactly what they were planning to do. So after
they weren't bags, they were huge boxes.
Huge. So I got to tell you, it was a little terrifying. And then he did his thing, and you have no idea how cold that room was. There was not a sound in that room. And I have to be honest with you, I didn't know what it was going to be. But the one thing I noticed, whether it's my way or the highway or somebody else's way, I'm looking for the best way, the most exciting way. And when I saw what he did, it was so different. It was hard to make that connection when you had your own idea of where you wanted to go, right? But I recognized that this was not just somebody hired to throw it together and throw it out there. Somebody had a vision. Somebody had an idea of where they wanted to go. And that excited me. And I got up and actually said a few words to the crowd, and I kind of said some nice words because I really felt very positive about Ron Moore. And then it became, and then Moses got up, you know, and parted the river, you know, and I've kind of heard that little story with Ron kind of at a few conventions, but I felt so bad because the trouble is with all of us fans, we love what we love, and we get upset when people change what we love. But the truth is, you know, things do have to grow, evolve, move forward. You can't just keep everything the same. Hopefully, they don't lose the heart and soul of what we love about a particular show, right? But you know, certain things are going to change. And every writer, producer I know wants to come in and not just do a duplication. They don't want to do a replication. They want to come and step into it and bring some creative vision, new energy, and take it to the next level. And I honestly believe, like I've told so many people, I thought Ron Moore and that writing staff, that acting staff was one of the most extraordinary experiences I've ever had. I was so proud to be part of that show.
And to give you an idea what the reception Ron got, after he gave his presentation and Richard spoke, we had a little bit of Q&A. And when I first went in to interview for my job, we had a little, you know, hi, I'm Ron Moore, I'm Kevin Grazier. He stopped and said, you look familiar. I said, yeah, Galactica, and I asked you the only two polite questions you got all night. That's how bad it was.
I think, and I think that's a very important point, Richard, because we don't want the next Battlestar Galactica to be the last Battlestar Galactica. Star Trek has already proven how disastrous that model is, because after Deep Space Nine, which was the best Star Trek ever, because Ron Moore was on it, partly, the next two were just carbon copies. They were just reiterating the same old thing over and over, and ultimately, as much as you might love it, it gets boring. So that's it. So that being said, Richard, I'm going to ask you a question. You saw Ron's version you're back at Galacticon 25. You hear Ron's version. You hear Tom DeSanto's version. I sat in on Tom DeSanto's talk and heard his version, which was involved. You know, you gave me your feedback on that. Involved 30 years later, and the crew has moved on, and some have died, and there's a new generation. It was really interesting. It was not dissimilar to the Second Coming trailer you did, which was amazing, and your books. And then you have your books and the Second Coming trailer and all that. It's easy to say I would have loved to have seen it go that way. Certainly I would have loved to have seen yours. But now that you've seen it in retrospect, give me your feedback.
Yeah, and then I want to, if we can, get all of you who wants to come up, get in the line here if you can. If you've got something to say about what you would like to see, with where Battlestar can go in the future in the next couple of years, what would you like to see in a new movie? Would you like to see, you know, a combination of the old and new show? Where would you like it to go? The thought was, if they go 30 years forward, but the trouble with the new show is they went to Earth, you know, and my feeling about it was, I thought there were so many more stories to tell in that Galactica, but because the network, I think, was already kind of iffy about supporting Battlestar, I think people don't realize the way they look at the Nielsen, especially then, and the way we watch television now. No, how many want to watch 20 minutes of commercial per episode? Anybody? So we TiVo it. Sometimes we wait till the whole season's over and we buy the DVD and we watch it back to back. We don't watch it the normal way. And if you don't watch it within 24 hours, it wouldn't even register. So the question was, everywhere I went, it looked like more people were watching the show, not less, and yet their ratings seemed to register less people. So they were going to basically take it off. So they rushed, for me, an ending that should have taken, I think, another year or two.
Yeah.
And so, but if they didn't get to Earth, see, for me, there were so many more stories to tell. So what do you do? Where do you go? How do you do this? Because the original show only went so far, so it never got to Earth. 1980, I throw out. I had my frontal lobe lobotomy. I thought was the worst. It was made for all the wrong reasons. The new show, I loved where they went with it, where they developed the characters, the story arcs, the character arcs. But the question is, with the new show, the only way I would think they could bridge new territory would be to go forward from where they were. And that means whether it's 20 years forward, 30 years forward, where they could, if they're going to use the new show, they could use some of the characters from this new show and add some new characters as they move forward. That way you're going to go into areas of space you've never been in, you're going to bring in some new characters, and yet you're going to have the familiar characters that you relate to, that you care about, and that you love. So the question would be, how do you bridge that? Some of you want to throw away the new show and go back to the original. Glenn Larson is the producer on it. The question is, they want to reimagine again the original with the original mythology, but God knows where they're going to go with that. So the question is, what would you like to see? So, somebody in line there? Yeah, come on up. Is that mic on?
It's not on.
From the diaphragm.
Do that into the...
But it's not.
It's not working. Go ahead, just to speak loud, I'll repeat the question.
You were starting to say, it's all happened before. I think I know where you're going.
Well, we've already had 2 iterations of this cycle, right?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So the plot kind of goes originally, all of this has happened before, right? Well, in the context of string theory, could we possibly have the same cast, but maybe, not the same cast, same characters, but maybe playing different lives? So, for example, maybe, I don't know, Chief could be in love with the president. So that's kind of my idea. Yeah.
So it's sort of, not quite a JJ, but something in the area, like we're on a different timeline.
Yeah, sort of, yeah, string theory, infinite number of possibilities for the same event.
So that's what string theory is, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics.
Is that the only liaison that you would like to see? What other characters would you like to have seen got together?
Well, I think Richard Hatch could have been, I don't know, maybe the captain of the ship. I don't know.
No, but who would Tom Zarek get to you know, frack?
It's fine. I actually was going to mention something that I think earlier, because the new people are saddled with, you know, do we really want to see the destruction of the colonies again? I mean, they have to somehow establish that that happened, and they can't rely on what's been done in the past. So how are they going to do that and not, you know, that would take up the bulk of an episode if they chose to show that. And so they have to establish it quickly. So a parallel universe thing would be, I think, really kind of cool. I'm not sure they would go for that, but again, I'd pay to see that.
Thanks for the question. Thank you. Next one, we're on a tight time frame.
Hi. I've introduced about a dozen people to the new show, and I've done it by way of the board game. And if nobody here is amazing. Everybody's working together. There's some hidden silence, but the thing takes 3 or 4 hours. And so my biggest concern when I heard, we're thinking about a movie, was for this board game to be a good representation of the show, to have all that speculation and tension for the epic journey. It takes, you know, much longer than the span of the movie. So I was wondering if you you guys had any thoughts about how the epic nature of the show and the speculation that's so much fun between episodes could be fit into a movie or if it has a place.